So one thing I want to tell you about ZoeInsights, what our vision is, and our vision is about ensuring everybody is connected to their data, their resources, and their community to live their best possible life. All right. It's not about your disease, it's about your journey in life and how you could live optimally. And my backstory, as some of you may know, is this whole genesis for ZoeInsights, and my advocacy work has started from my experience as a caregiver to my late wife. She had cancer, and in her story, she became an outlier. And then from that, people were asking us, well, what did you do? And we started to go to medical conferences and also seminars and talk about the power of health data and how we used it to make the right decisions. We also use the community. And so those are two fundamental building blocks of, I believe, of owning your own health and living your best possible life. And so it all started from a personal experience. And so with her, as I was saying, she was an outlier because when her symptoms started, she was misdiagnosed. And by the time she was diagnosed, it was already late stage cancer, and she was given months to live, but she lived over 5 years from the symptom start to the end. And so people, especially physicians, were questioning, well, what did you do and what approach you took? And we took a very holistic approach. And so that's going to be kind of has influenced this webinar and the past webinars I've done in terms of a lot of it comes from my personal experience, but also others from the discussions I've had and talking to other patients, caregivers, and to see what they've done. And so the path to empowerment, I mean, that's one thing about being an outlier, is that you are empowered with your health. And the first thing it starts off with is filling the gap in knowledge, right? Often when you have a medical condition, there's a lot of uncertainty there. And so what you want to do is find resources, find information, and you become hungry for that information. And there's only so much you can get from your health center, and then you start going online. And so there's the question is, well, how do you navigate online? How do you get real information? How do you know the source of that information? And we actually gave a webinar on that, on how the power of health data in your hands. That was one of our first webinars. So the fundamental building blocks is knowledge of what's out there, but also knowledge about your own health, and start collecting your own data. We then go to a point of decision making, and how do you make decisions? And so there's a lot of websites out there, like inspire.com I reference to, is a portal for patients to share their information, such as clinical trials that are available, their experience on clinical trials, their experience on medications. There's bloggers who are really good to connect with because they're motivated to share their story. You also have many patient organizations. Again, that's the whole concept there, is to build a community of people. And with that becomes the ability to form a group, network with like-minded people who could then help you make decisions or provide you with lessons learned from their experience, and coaching, which always helps making your decisions. Now, when we talk about outliers, the outliers go a step further in terms of they're taking charge of their health, and sometimes they go beyond their immediate care team. And so they have a lot of confidence, which means their confidence comes into the knowledge that they've received and also the community. And it's like anything, more wisdom you have, typically you're better you're at that craft. And so outliers are very good in their health journey in terms of making decisions and assessing what needs to be done. And so that's the topic of this webinar, is the outliers. And one thing I want to mention is, as you move up to become an outlier, one thing you often do is you decrease your privacy. right? And so not all the time, but often you have to share your own information. And so I would say my philosophy is that health trumps privacy. There'll be a point in time when health trumps privacy. And then you also take more risks because you're looking at practitioners or information that's outside your immediate comfort zone. But there's a lot of ways of validating that information. And so those are the two things. As you increase and become an outlier, you decrease privacy. Often you take more risks, and that's why you need more knowledge. For everybody who hasn't seen the previous webinars, they are on our website. You could just go to the resources tab and click on webinars, and you'll see the recordings there. So what is an outlier? So in general terms, the person doesn't accept the status quo. So in my experience, my wife's experience, we never asked the prognosis of her disease because we didn't believe we are a statistic. They didn't know her mental health, her attitude, her perseverance, her support, and that could be financial support as well as family support. All of this comes into play. And all that influences where you're going to be. And so I'll talk a bit in a few slides about a placebo effect, but more control and power you give to your care provider and they tell you certain instructions, you're going to start believing it. That's a good thing, but also you have to be cautious about that. And so being an outlier is about statistically being out on the right side of the bell curve, right? And so that's the textbook definition, anyone who falls outside the normal range. So coming back to your care team and the attitude, I'll share a personal story. So when we got diagnosed and we had our first appointment with our oncologist, and the first oncologist told us we would measure life expectancy within months, not years. And I still remember that day because we were infuriated with one, how pessimistic he was, two, how he didn't know us. And if you knew my wife, she's a very assertive woman where she didn't accept, she would not accept that. And so we took it upon ourselves to change our oncologist, right? And you have to be assertive that way. You want a team that believes in you. And don't be afraid to change practitioners. They work for you, right? They're there to help you, and genuinely that's what they want to do. And if you need to find that a person is not jiving with you or on the same page as you, then replace them. You have that ability in Canada as elsewhere. You have that right. And so the philosophy, what we took is you have a board of advisors, right? You're your own CEO. So you have a board of advisors, and the advisors are people who are on your care team, right? If you have a caregiver, you're the CEO. And my wife was a chairwoman. She made the ultimate decisions. I executed it, and we were informed by our board of directors. And the board of directors were our care team. And if we needed to swap one out, we did. So for us, we had two oncologists, and both of them we have utmost gratitude for, but they believed in us. They believed that, and they're very open and receptive of our thinking, of the knowledge we gained, even the treatment we got outside of our existing system. And that's what you want. You want people who are there to really follow you on your journey. On our care team, we also had, it was a very holistic approach. So we had a nutritionist, we had a naturopath, we had a life coach. Just because we were in our 30s, we preferred a life coach. And we obviously had our medical team. And then we had some key family members. Not everybody, because sometimes it's a burden, but some key family members who will just do what we need to get done, right? And that's important especially for I'd say for caregivers, because you want to focus on healing, and so there's a long circle of activities that need to be done, and you want to delegate that outbound. So it's very important as an outlier that acknowledge that you can't do this alone. You don't need to do this alone, but you need the right people around you. And this is why I use analogy of a business. Right? So you have the chairwoman or chairman, CEO, board of directors, and then possibly even other advisors. And you organize it such that because of that information flow has to be done optimally. So outliers take control of their health. And the two books that resonated with me is one is the Radical Remission. Now, this was cancer focused, but her conclusions are agnostic to the disease. And so what Dr. Turner did is she was a medical doctor, she was a researcher, and she researched we should be going to see the oncologist, and she actually saw case reports about patients going from stage 4 and being cured, or having far better outcomes than what was expected. And so there's a lot of scientific case reports there, but then when she went to the oncologist, they would dismiss her and dismiss the people, and that infuriated her. And so she took upon herself to do the research. And what she did is she interviewed many of those people, found out what they did, and then found out the consistency in terms of what are the attributes they did. And it's interesting, and I'll show you a bit what they did. It's interesting because there are a lot of them are non-medical. Dispenza, his story was he was an avid cyclist. He was in a race. He got into an accident with a car, became paraplegic, was told that he'll never walk again and he'll need a rod in his spine. And he used the power of the mind to heal himself. So in essence, what he did is he created a mental model in his mind of him walking, and he let the physical world catch up to him. Now, there's a lot of science behind that. And in his books, he talks about the evidence-based path that he's taken. And so both of them I find quite interesting reads, and they influence my life and also my wife. So as I was talking to Dr. Turner's outlined key factors in living an optimal life, right? And one of it obviously is taking charge, changing your diet, right? Following your intuition. I think part of following intuition is really getting into that state of mind. Perhaps meditation will allow you to get in that state of mind. For my wife, it was painting. That she loved to do. That was her zone, right? So find that out. Herbs and supplements, and we had an oncologist in Chicago that would recommend different supplements for the different times. And he would give us the backing. He would give us the, he was associated with Harvard, so the Harvard reviews on these supplements. And so there we got a conflict because our oncologist here in Calgary said no supplements, no antioxidants, don't do it. But our oncologist in Chicago said, no, this is the care that I provide and fully support it. So you're going to have to make these type of decisions. And sometimes those you have to decide on who you're going to follow. For us, what we found out is 2 years later, a lot of the supplements that we were taking were then approved or accepted by the center here. So what happened? Why did it take 2 years? It's basically because our system lagged in that area of recommendation. They had to do their own study. They had to go through up the hierarchy to get the blessing, and it just took time. So releasing suppressed emotions, right? And also having positive emotions. So I've done a lot of work myself about suppressed emotions, and it's interesting how much your emotions and your experience as a child influences not only yourself as an adult, but also it can manifest in a disease. There's a gentleman from Vancouver called Gabe Mate, who is MD and I can't say a psychologist, but he's done a lot of work in that space about childhood trauma. That doesn't mean necessarily abuse. It's just, the trauma is a wide definition, but how that can manifest in adulthood in different forms. Social support and having a community. Very hard. It was challenging during COVID times, but it's important to find that social support. And often, you look for people who are like you. And so if you're going through a medical condition, you're looking to connect with them. Deepening your spiritual connection. And that's one thing which she said was consistent amongst the outliers. Joe Dispenza talks about the placebo effect and how the mind is that powerful that if you believe in it, it'll come true. And he talks, one thing resonated with me is that the placebo effect is so strong that pharmaceutical companies would use double or triple blind randomized studies to try to exclude the power of the mind over the body when evaluating new drugs. So there's actually clinical evidence that placebo effect does work. Now, the other thing which resonated with me, he talked about how the mind can't tell the difference between what you're thinking, what you're seeing, and what's actually happening. So if you watch the news and you see violence, you see fear, you see negative stories, your mind can't tell that that's the news or not happening to you. Sometimes you could feel it in your body, or the adrenaline rush. That's a fight or flight response. And so that's what your body's doing. And so one thing which we did is we stopped watching the news. We read the news, but we didn't watch it because we felt that was very different. And eventually, it really changed what we watched on TV because of that. We realized that the mind was absorbing a lot of this subconsciously. And in our today's age, my personal opinion is that there's a lot of fear going around, and negativity, and that constant input can be exhausting. So before I go to the next slide, we have a question here, so I'm just going to answer that. Is being an outlier all related to life expectancy, or were there qualitative factors that you also considered? Let me think about that question. So being an outlier is not just about how long you live. It's about the quality of life you live, right? And so part of that being an outlier is that's for us was our main goal was quality of life or quantity. And that's part of being your health optimization, and it's part and parcel. I mean, if I look back at this list here about following your intuition, releasing suppressed emotion, and embracing social support, those resonate with me when I talk about quality of life. And so I think being an outlier is about living the most optimum life, having your most optimum health, which is being an outlier. Oh, sorry, which is about quality over quantity. So by all means, anybody who wants to ask questions, please do throughout the presentation. So this is a common theme, and I present a common slide I present on my presentations. This was my wife's journals. She meticulously wrote down a lot of her information to find patterns. We had the infamous paper binder, and we collected all this information, and that's part of the building blocks of being assertive and being an outlier, is having your own information that's readily available. Because when you start talking to others, you can start relating to your story, and you want to be accurate. And so you want to start describing it. So you have to start collecting your information. The bottom is actually a graph, and I do talk about this graph because it shows how the same information provided in a different form can yield different results, which allows you to take different actions. So coming back to the question about, outliers and a quality of life, qualitative factors. So we always got our blood work. Part of that is a tumor marker test. And so we'd be plotting it on a graph. So what we found is a physician would look at that sheet of paper, that instant in time of what that marker was, and then move forward, right? So we started tracking this ourselves and graphing it, and he was very appreciative because he could see the trend. We could see the trend. And so I have a circle there of how you see the uptick in the CA markers, and that's because that was an indication of progression. And there was no symptoms. She was just doing fine, but that marker indicated a progression, which allowed us to take actions. Our oncologist moved the CT scan forward to validate our hypothesis, which was correct. And then we had a longer poll, longer time to actually find another solution, which allowed us to keep our quality of life and have peace of mind while we're looking for other options. So that's an example of how the form of the data is sometimes important, not just the knowledge itself. So this all talks about the power of health data in your hands. It's a webinar that's on our website, so by all means, you can refer to it. So we're going to take a break from talking, and I'm just curious to know from the audience what methods you use to track your health data. And our the host, Julian, will be launching a poll for you in Zoom for you to complete, but we're just curious about this. You should be able to see it on your screen. So we'll give a couple of minutes for you to answer. Okay. Just give a few more seconds. So maybe we'll close the poll and see the results. Julian there it is. Okay, so I guess I'll just show it to everybody, and you can see. It's good to see. So you can see how common paper is, right? It's great to see we have some people using ZoeInsights, but paper and memory are the most common ways of tracking your information. So I think we also had patient portals, and so I'll just talk a bit about your sources of information and the differences. When it comes to patient portals, it's a good way of collecting your information, but it's all historic and it's not necessarily all complete. So let's just be aware that those are some of your medical reports, but when we say your health history and collecting your binder, it's about your medical information, but also every aspect or health provider you have, and their contribution or their information to be centrally stored. Paper obviously is quite common because it's convenient and memory. But thank you. So I'm going to go on about, we talked a bit about collecting your own data, about the attitude in terms of being an outlier, and there are different attributes of them. So I think finding a community is very important. And so when we started our journey, I went to look for peers who are actively involved, who are blogging. And I met a gentleman who's a caregiver from Norway, who had a group of people from around the world. And the benefit of this is that we would start sharing our reports, start sharing our information, our experience, and it gave us the ability to peer into a medical center that that we wouldn't have access to. That's a primary thing about peers. So we knew what the standard of care for my wife's disease was in Norway or at Dana-Farber or in Australia. And that helped us ask the questions, because the questions you ask influences the care you get. And so for us, when we had a challenge and our intuition was saying, well, this is not right, then we were able to send that message out to our peers and get a different response in their opinions, and that helped us make a more informed decision. An example would be at Tom Baker, this is a cancer center. If brain involvement, brain metastasis is quite common with lung cancer, and so but over there they did CT scans as a reactive response. You show the symptoms, we'll validate with a CT scan. It's like, no, right? What they do at Dana-Farber is they do MRIs because it's much more accurate, and they do it proactively. And we had the confidence to push for that, because we didn't say, oh, one patient said this. We said, at this institution, for people with the same profile as us, this is their standard of care. Why aren't you following that standard of care? Right? It's a very direct, but very informed question. And in our case, the oncologist says it was just because of money that they stick with CT scans. But eventually, we got what we wanted, which was standard regular MRIs. And the end result was that whenever there was any brain involvement, we were able to react. So coming to the original question, was it about outliers, about life expectancy? No, it was about quality of life. And so she had no neurological symptoms or issues throughout her journey. And that's because we were very vigilant, because we used the community to help us. So how do you find the community? So talk about patient organizations. Many of them are out there. Don't only go to Canadian ones. There's some that are international. Find the organization that fits you. Bloggers. The good thing about bloggers is often they narrate their story. And then if you have your own information, you can see that their journey is similar to yours. You can validate the blogger's journey, and it gives credibility. And then eventually it's about finding your peers, and that's not that easy. We found them through bloggers. There's a lot of friction there. And so this is something that we're looking at implementing in ZoeInsights, is a way to connect with peers. It's peer-to-peer. Crowdsourcing, if you haven't heard this term, but it's basically using the crowd to provide you with the answers. And the hypothesis is that the crowd and the aggregate information and experiences can provide answers that are different, could be more accurate than an individual. And I think in this day and age with the internet, crowdsourcing is going to become a much more useful tool in the medical knowledge space. And this is important because medical knowledge on its own is doubling every 72 days. So if you think about our healthcare system, our universal healthcare system devised in the 1960s, I would say it became Today's model was solidified in 1982, Canadian Healthcare Act. In 1960s, medical knowledge doubled every 50 years. So it was okay to remain static. In 1980s, it was every 7 years, and now it's 72 days. There's absolutely no way one individual or health practitioner will understand and keep up with that knowledge and be able to practice, right? And that's not just a medical practitioner. That could be your, look at things holistically, right? So it could be your physiotherapist, chiropractor, it could be oncologist. This knowledge is going to rapidly increasing, and this is why searching for peers and looking for the crowd can help you make better decisions, because you're looking for people who've gone through this experience. This is a slide from an older slide deck that I presented to the Alberta oncologist here about what people are getting as a cancer patient. Now, I narrate cancer because that's where I'm familiar with, but I've known people with rare diseases going outside the system to get genetic mutation testing, and they do that, be it privately. But these are some list of what's available outside. So it's very important to expand your footprint to beyond your medical care team to look for what's outside there. And that's part of being an outlier. It's part of challenging the system. And I'll give you some, for example, and these might look costly, but they're all dropping in price. So the foundation one is gene mutation testing. We did this because our healthcare system denied my wife a test. And we wanted to do this test because we gave the material to say, you know what, this is what they do in other cities, is they constantly test to make sure that they find a marker which may possibly lead to a new treatment. They said no. They said, we did it once, we're not going to do it again. And so we went to Boston to get this test done from Foundation One. It came back positive for the latest lung cancer drug. She lived another 18 months because of that. Right, so this is an example where we went outside the system, coaching from our peers. We found where to go, and we had this test done. Now that test was $4,000 US. Now it's around $500 to $1,000. You could do it here at Calgary. They could do it. It's all falling in price, and so what I see the future will be is direct to consumer testing, and so you'll still need your primary care team, but you could compensate their constraints. They want to help you, but their constraints with going elsewhere, and holistically, you'll have the information and the care team to work together. Another poll. So we're just curious to know what sources do you use to learn about your health condition? And we'll just give you a couple minutes for the poll. Let's give it a few more seconds. Simple poll. Okay, maybe Julian, do you want to show the results? Yes. So here's some of the results. The infamous Google. Or patient organizations, that's a good one. Right? And then when you get into like the bloggers, PubMed, conferences, I'd say that's where a lot of people are assertive of their health and take charge of their health. They rely on. So yeah, that's great. So one thing I want to end with is about when it comes to your health, think holistically. So we have your medical team, and often we rely on the medical team and let's say pharmaceuticals, but optimum health and good quality of life is a lot more than medical. It's there's various aspects to your health, and that's something that you have to think about, and that's what Kelly Turner mentioned in her book. And so some of the building blocks I like to highlight about looking holistically about your health. One is knowledge, so we talk about that. Assertiveness, build that confidence. Having that peers to help you validate, and also having a second opinion helps you be assertive when it comes to talking to your primary care team and knowing the direction you want to go. The community, we talked about that. Intuition, right? Just intuition. I mean, we know what that is. It's your gut feeling, but listen to it, right? Be present at the time and just listen to your intuition, and it will may give you a path that it's well worth investigating. Remove negativity. So this is about emotion, especially when it comes to friction with could it be partners or relationships. It's interesting, even with us, what we did is we had a group of people, but as we went on this journey, we actually shrunk our circle, and it's just because we realized that some relationships weren't good for us. We still keep in touch, but we also kept our distance. Nutrition. There's a good book called There's Lead in Your Lipstick, Canadian author, and it talks about, actually that's about more clean environment and nutrition. Lead in Your Lipstick talks about a clean environment and all the toxins that are there, and especially in the household. So in my household, I only use natural products. That's what I believe it, but it's not philosophical. It's based on this research done by a lady who actually looked at the chemical compositions in a lot of our everyday products, and that gets ingested. It's foreign to the body, and so a clean environment is important. Nutrition. We read a lot about the environmental working group, and they talked about nutrition, organic food, non-organic food. I mostly eat organic food all the time. No, because there's a lot of aspects to living your best possible life, but they actually talk about which foods should be organic, which should not, and that's based on their testing. And so it's a good guide. There's the Dirty Dozen. I think it's called Dirty Dozen and Clean 16. So there's a lot of things which doesn't matter. You don't have to buy organic. But also in nutrition, it's about while you're going through your treatment, how do you stay healthy, and how do you feed the body nutrition, because it's needing that to heal as well. So, and that actually concludes the webinar. We talked about the power of the mind, about collecting your information, finding a community, to be an outlier, be assertive, and think holistically about your health to improve your quality of life. And I would like to open it up to any questions that people have. Just looking if there's any questions here. Oh yeah, we have a few here. Okay, we have 2 questions here. The first one: how do you maintain your energy to continue to be assertive throughout the process? That's a good question. Definitely was exhausting. Definitely those moments of breaking down. I think the way I did it was for me, I had gratitude for what this life has brought me. That I took more of a spiritual path. Is the gratitude. Gratitude for every day, and to be honest, it's the gratitude of what being a caregiver, somebody who has metastasized cancer, what benefits I've received from that, right? What is the gift cancer is giving you? I wouldn't say it was said in those terms for my wife, but I know that she, at the end, she said she lived her best possible life. So I think knowing that is the ultimate outcome, you strive for that, and by striving for that, you could be, you'll have the energy to make the decision you need, because you have a higher purpose. Find your higher purpose, right? If it could be, some people live for their children, right? That's their higher purpose. That's how they get their energy. Find out where you're tapping in. Find out and tap into your energy. The other question. Thank you. Thank you. The person was supportive of what I was saying. So the person talks about, she said is about sorry, I'm just reading the question. She's I'm trying to paraphrase the phrase. Is the question is how do you be assertive and proactive when you have only so much energy to convince professionals on so I'm trying to paraphrase this, but the question is, how do you be assertive when you have limited energy and you have to really convince professionals, and it is fight for your rights, right? And especially if you want to think alternatively, that's always, I think, a tough question. Is how do you fight for what you want when there's resistance? When there's resistance from your care professional. And sometimes it's not easy to change change professionals, or you're just too vested in, or there's some aspects of them that you're really important. It's hard to answer. But one thing we did is, well, we were transparent with information which we felt they would respect. So find out what they value. This is why we went to PubMed and medical journals to convey the path we're taking. Two is the art of telling them that you want to live the best possible life and make this easier for them. Speak to what they value, but you're not trying to override them. At times, we did stuff which we didn't tell our primary care team, because we knew that we looked down upon. But we found another professional that we had faith in, and so we leaned towards them. So sometimes it's about going around them. It's not an easy question to answer, because lots of it depends on human nature, right? Your care team are human; they're just humans. So there's always going to be ego. There's going to be personality. There's going to be their own constraints. Even the way they on that day, well, we know what they're going to experience. So it's not easy, but I think those are the things I would suggest. The other question: what practice or practitioner did you find the most helpful in releasing suppressed emotion? Oh, that's interesting. For me personally, I went to I went to, and I still do. I would say I subscribe to Martini. Um, Martini, I would say his title is human behavior specialist, and he talks. He has a methodology to really, you could say, neutralize that charge. What I like about him is that he does apply science and logical thinking, which for me that's important, and he just talks about how emotion is energy in motion, and it's a negative charge. And so he comes to the philosophy is like, oh, well, how do you neutralize that? And he has a methodology for that. That was one. The the other way about suppressed emotion is uh, meditation and living in the present. But what I do, like I'll come back to DeMartini, is just because um, it's really stuck in there in the subconscious. And I would also listen to Gabe Mate, and if you email me, I'll give the exact wording. He's a physician in Vancouver, and he talks about that, about how from year 0 to 5, your brain is in record, and you're recording how you're supposed to respond to certain events based on what you see in parents as well as your surroundings, and that becomes the foundation to start building your personality. And so your subconscious reaction as an adult could be traced back to how you were as a child. So then there's methods to uncouple that. Um, those are a few others. The other one, which is an Indian, I guess you call him yogi. He's called Satguru, Satguri, and he has courses on. He has a book called. Sorry, I'll just actually look at it quickly for you so I know. Inner engineering. He also has a lot of talks on YouTube. Satguru, Satguru, and if you look, he has a book called Inner Engineering, and I'm just typing it right now. Yeah, it's more on I would say living your best possible life, but it's more of a spiritual book. So I wouldn't say religious at all, but it's more on the spiritual side. So in conclusion, how do you release suppressed emotion? What I used was DeMartini. Just Googled John DeMartini. Then I did a lot of meditation. Then I did readings from Gabe Mate and Sakuru. Sorry, Gabor Mate, Gabor Mate, Mate. And he's a physician based out of Vancouver. Question about DeMartini. How do you follow him on website? So in terms of DeMartini, I actually took his courses. I think they've changed quite a bit because of the because it's all online. But he would be the two centers he'd come is Calgary and Calgary and Toronto in Canada. But he has his courses. The course that I took was his first course he took is breakthrough. The whole concept, how do you break through that emotional baggage? I felt his book is also called Breakthrough. So if you email me afterwards, I'm happy to give some of these links and to his books. But his courses were quite good, and he also has regular talks he does online. But that really, for me, what it does, his whole concept is to shift the subconscious, and by shifting your subconscious, you'll feel it physically, and I believed in that. Okay, we're almost at the end of the hour. So I'll see if there's any more questions, and then we'll wrap up soon. Yeah, well, you're welcome. There's some notes of gratitude. And so we'll probably wrap this session up. And if you have any other questions, please, by all means, reach out to me at Shaneel@ZoeInsights.com. But I want to thank you for attending this webinar and wish you all the best in your journey. Thank you.